you were watching my video from yesterday, then this video is going to make perfect sense. Okay. Let me start by saying this. Some commentary to the Casey Anthony Parent Lie Detector series on A&E. It is a 1 hour and 30-minute series. If you have been following the Casey Anthony case, then I would definitely recommend that y'all watch the series. The series is in response to Casey Anthony's docuseries last year in November of 2020 on Peacock, where she made several allegations against George and Cindy Anthony, specifically to the murder of her child as well as SA. So I'm definitely going to do this video to kind of bring it about another rabbit hole, and it totally warrants a separate video. During our live yesterday, a wonderful member and supporter brought to my attention some of the documents, a bankruptcy that was filed by a man named Dominic Casey. Dominic Casey actually worked for the defense team in Casey Anthony's case, Jose Baez, that team. And so he made explosive allegations in this bankruptcy filing. Now, back in 2016, when this kind of came out, there was only a couple of people that were reporting it. So we definitely want to highlight that. And I definitely feel like it's important as far as where the truth lies. No pun intended to Casey Anthony.
Some shocking allegations tonight made by a former private investigator who worked for Casey Anthony's defense team. He's claiming that her attorney, Jose Baez, told him Anthony murdered her daughter Caylee and buried her body. Josh Benson joins us now with an update to this story that really captured the attention of the nation. And you just heard back from Baez law firm. What have you learned here, Josh?
Not long ago, yeah, that's right, Keith. Just minutes ago, Jose Baez law firm sent me this. It's a cease and desist letter. He doesn't want us to report what we found in court documents from Casey's bankruptcy proceedings, but I'll tell you, the documents, they read like a suspense novel. Claims of sex, fraud, cover-up, framing, even a tie to a drug kingpin.
The two affidavits packed with damning claims by former private investigator Dominic Casey, who was hired by the defense in July of 2008. Within weeks after starting this, Baez had told me that Casey had murdered Caylee and dumped the body somewhere, and he needed all the help he could get to find the body before anyone else did. As for the man who found Caylee's remains, Dominic Casey claims there were talks of framing Roy Kronk. Casey had also left the back gate ajar. Since Roy Kronk was a meter reader for the house, maybe we could say he kidnapped Caylee. The former private investigator talked of Casey Anthony's financial situation. She had no money and willingly entered into a second agreement with Jose Baez individually. Dominic Casey even claimed there were deals made with sex, referring to a time when Casey didn't want to do a television interview. He called the network, saying they would have to take a rain check, hung up the phone, and said to Casey, "You now owe me $3 blank blank." The former PI goes on to claim, "I arrived at Baez's office unexpectedly one day and once again witnessed a naked Casey. Casey told me she had to do what Jose said because she had no money for her defense."
Dominic Casey even alleges that a convicted drug trafficker and money launderer for Mexican drug lord El Chapo put up more than $500,000 for Casey Anthony's defense fund. Keith?
Well, I guess I can see why Jose Baez didn't want us giving out information about this. But what does he say in that cease and desist letter? I mean, those are unbelievable allegations against him.
Yeah, he said, straight from that letter, he said these documents came from an attention-seeking, delusional individual with a history of making false and outrageous claims, not only to court officials, but to the media.
So Dominic Casey wrote a 3-part book that everybody can find. You can even get it for free in a PDF format on Kindle. And it's called Privilege Waived, Consensual Chaos, Caylee Marie Anthony. And he basically accounts his whole experience with the case. So if you read the filings, the bankruptcy filings from like 2016, you're definitely going to want to look at this book. It's definitely free. I'm going to link all that information in the description box so y'all can read it. It is filled with information. One of the things I want to start by saying before I get into this edited video a little bit more is something that he said in his book that I think it's important to highlight in present time. George and Cindy had both taken polygraph tests before Casey was indicted by the grand jury in October of 2008. There was nothing that would incriminate either of them in these tests. Neither George or Cindy had any involvement in the demise of Caylee. Neither one of them caused any harm, inappropriately touched, fondled, or molested Casey or Caylee. They had no knowledge of, nor did they do any internet searches for chloroform or other deadly substances. There was no drowning, accidental or otherwise, that occurred in the presence of either George or Cindy. Baez knew of the polygraph test. He did not know the results and was eager to know. It was something I could not disclose at the time because of privilege. So again, just a reminder, back in 2008, Cindy and George Anthony had taken polygraph tests. And according to Dominic Casey, there was nothing that would have incriminated them in 2008 when they took these tests. This is what he said, page straight out of the book. My name is Dominic Casey, and I'm over the age of 18. Yeah, this is what 10 to Life read. I'm competent to testify to the matters contained herein, and I make this affidavit on my own personal knowledge. In August of 2008, I was a detective hired to work with the defense team for the murder trial wherein Casey Anthony was accused of killing her daughter Caylee Marie Anthony. During the publicity involved in the missing child case, Casey Anthony became aware of telephone calls made to police by Roy in August of 2008, indicating he may have located the remains of Caylee Anthony. She, Casey Anthony, told me at the time, Caylee is not coming home. They need to get used to that. Oh, he said this? This was a detective that was hired for the defense, okay? Let me go back a little bit. This is Dominic Casey. He was over the age of 18. He was hired to work with the defense team for the murder trial wherein Casey Anthony was accused of killing her daughter, Caylee Marie Anthony. Okay. This is what he says. During the publicity involved in the missing child, Casey Anthony became aware of the telephone calls made to police by Roy in August of 2008, indicating he may have located the remains of Caylee Anthony. She, Casey Anthony, told me at the time Caylee is not coming home. They need to get used to that. And these are in air quotes. These are in air quotes right there. This is what she said. Okay. She, Casey Anthony, asked me in September of 2008 if the guy found anything. If the guy found anything, in air quotes. In October 2008, just prior to the remains being found, Casey Anthony told me that Caylee came up missing. The back gate was left ajar. Since Roy was a meter reader for the house, maybe he could say Roy kidnapped Caylee. Air quotes again. Maybe he could say Roy kidnapped Caylee. I told her then I would not do that because we both know he had nothing to do with Caylee's disappearance. But she was insistent that he, Roy, be implicated or blamed in some way. On December 11, 2008, it was confirmed that Roy had discovered Caylee's remains. During a meeting at the hotel that evening, Jose Baez came to meet with George and Cindy Anthony. She asked him that what she asked him what was found. Attorney Baez said, "Let's go to the room to talk. Roy is very, very suspicious." Now, let me stop right here. And when you watch the A&E thing, documentary, there is a part where Cindy talks about how Jose Baez, then attorney, told Cindy, let's go over here and let's talk and whatnot. Okay, keep that in mind. I have never met with or spoken with, corresponded with, or in any other matter communicated with Roy at any time to and included the date of the signing of this affidavit. Based on my personal knowledge of events and statements I personally heard from Casey Anthony, she authorized and permitted her attorneys, included Jose Baez, to make false statements about Roy to portray him as a murderer or a kidnapper of Caylee Anthony. Signed. They were looking to shift blame. They wanted to shift blame to dad, and then it came to this Roy guy. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. Y'all drop some hearts for Lindsay. This is an affidavit Dominic Casey provided in the bankruptcy case. Thank you for giving us, because I thought it was a bankruptcy affidavit, but I wasn't really sure like too much about it. So thank you. Lindsay says, Lindsay said, keep scrolling, it gets worse. Oh my gosh. So bankruptcy case against Casey because Roy was suing Casey for trying to throw him under the bus. Keep scrolling because it gets worse. Okay. You said page 9? Let me know in the chat. Page 9, right, love? Page 9. So here we go. Affidavit of Dominic Casey. My name is Dominic Casey, and I'm over the age of 18. I'm competent to testify to the matters. I make this affidavit on my own personal knowledge. In July of 2008, I was a detective hired by the Baez law firm to work with the defense team for Caylee Anthony, who was accused of killing her daughter, Caylee Marie Anthony. Within 2 weeks of Caylee Anthony's July 16, 2008 arrest, Jose Baez retained my agency DNA investigations. Saturday, July 26 of 2008, Baez had told me that Casey had murdered Caylee and dumped the body somewhere, and he needed all the help he could get to find the body before anyone else did. Shortly after being retained for the defense, I met Caylee Anthony at the jail. There was no doubt that she had psychological issues. Let me take a drink of this coffee. What they were had yet to be professionally diagnosed. Jose Baez refused to have her evaluated by a psychological professional. Casey had entered into a retainer agreement with the Baez law firm. Although Casey had been declared indigent at the state of Florida would pay for her defense, this retainer agreement required her to pay legal fees to the Baez law firm. She had no money and willingly entered into a second agreement with Jose Baez individually. In exchange for legal fees and under the terms of the second agreement, she signed over. Oh, this is the part that really pissed me off. Listen to what she signed over. Jose Baez is going to hell for this shit too. I'm just saying. But this is what. All right. In exchange for legal fees and under the terms of the second agreement, she signed over both her and Caylee's intellectual property rights, life rights. These life rights were exclusively licensed to Jose Baez individually. Okay? So you talk about books, pictures, all kinds of dealings. Yeah. So yeah, he did his job, but he did his job and some. But he made her sign all this shit, and I'm not gonna say he made her sign. She signed, right? These life rights were exclusively licensed to Jose Baez individually. The second agreement also required Casey to provide Baez with an extensive library of photographs, videos, and other items that he could sell. Listen, that he could sell, that Jose Baez could sell. Y'all hear that? August 4th of 2008, I met with Baez at his office to inform him of a statement Casey had made during jail video visitations with her father, mother, and brother, George, Cindy, and Lee. She had made statements suggesting that Kaylee's location. Look in familiar places. Check places we are familiar with. In my gut, she's still okay, and it still feels like she's close to home. I know in my heart she's not far. I can feel it. Girl knew where she was at the whole time. On hearing Casey's statements, I pulled up an aerial view of the Anthony's neighborhood, looking for an area she could have used to dispose of Kaylee's body. At the meeting at the meeting, Baez suggested to me if I could gain access to the swamp on Suburban Drive without being seen. To do so, it could help be the place Casey had dumped Kaylee's body. Y'all hear that? Yes, Grandma Sherry, you picked up on that. I'm so glad you said that. So Jose Baez, man. All right, let me keep reading. So he didn't want Dominic to be detected if he can get into the swamp. It could be the place where Casey had dumped Kaylee's body. So, all right, let's keep going. Access could not be gained at the time because of the active searches being conducted by law enforcement searchers, and the media presence presence in the area. August 8th of 2008, I presented evidence to Baez suggesting there could have been an accident and Caylee drowned in the backyard pool. The accident snowballed out of control. Casey panicked and dumped Caylee's body. Casey did not call for help because she was afraid to say anything. She then went on the run. She may allege that her father and her brother had been molesting her since she was 8 years old, and because of this, Casey was used to hiding her pain. 31 days later, Casey's mother, Cindy, located her. Casey had been hiding out at a new boyfriend's apartment. Her family and longtime friends did not know the new boyfriend and did not know where he lived. August 11th, 2008, a meter reader by the name of Roy walked into the utility easement for Suburban Drive. He saw a little round object in the swamp, which he believed to be a child's skull. At about 4:28 p.m., he called 911 to report what he believed to have seen. One of Casey's high school friends, Keo Marie Cruz, lived on the same street as Casey. She had also called the sheriff's department and informed them that Casey, Jessica, and Keo Marie had used Suburban Drive as a teenage hangout. Because this was a familiar place, Keo Marie said that Casey may have buried Caylee there. The Night News reported that Keo Marie and the deputy sheriff drove around the neighborhood along Suburban Drive. Okay, let me stop right here. This is page 3. I want to know, when was this filed? This is this was back in like 2016, right, Lindsay? So this was notarized back in 2008, and this documentary or docuseries came out for Caylee Anthony came out last year. Oh my God. Like, what? What? So this is an affidavit. I mean, if you're believing what this affidavit reads, it says a lot about he's defending his client, right? He's going to do by all means necessary. That's what he's going to do. Listen, it doesn't matter what Baez believes. I'm pretty sure he believes that she's guilty, but he's going to protect his client by all means necessary. But why would he need her, like, the rights? Why would he need her rights, her life rights, and Caylee Anthony's life rights? Like, why? So he could sell books, and he's going to make his money one way or another, right? He's going to recover his costs by all means necessary, right? I hear you. It's unethical in my opinion, but he's doing what he has to do to protect his clients. Even like, all right, let's keep reading this. One of Casey's, we talked about that. It was a teenage hangout. Where was I at? On August 12th, 2008, the state attorney offered limited immunity for Casey in exchange for information regarding Caylee. Casey wanted to accept the plea deal. Baez told her to wait until he returned from New York and he would be able to bond her out of jail.
Caylee.
On August 14th.
So yeah, I may look like I'm in charge. Wrong. I'm completely pushed away from everything.
No. All
Everything,
he's telling you is that you can tell they have to honor your wishes when you say something. That's all Dad's trying to tell you. Jose has to honor
And
your
he
wishes.
has been, Mom.
Okay.
He has been with everything. Everything.
Well, you know he's in New York now for a couple days.
He's doing stuff for business for me.
I know.
Well, Mom, you're not telling me anything that I don't know. Please, I don't want to get frustrated or upset with you, but...
Well, I just, in his absence, Dominic's a good person if you want to talk to anybody.
Mom, Thank you. I've already talked to everybody. I know who I'm allowed to talk to, who I'm not allowed to talk to, who I can see, who I can't see, who's going to see me, who's not going to see me. We arranged all of this. It's already been set up. Again, he's the one person that's keeping me in the loop because he's the only person that can. And he's making sure that he's doing that in every way possible.
Well, I just hope he's telling you honestly what you're up against.
Mom, I know what I'm honestly up against. Do you guys understand what I'm honestly up against? And with keeping me here, you're not helping me help myself.
Well,
I'm sorry to say that. Huh?
You're safe, honey. We don't have the means to get you out anyway, sweetheart. We don't.
I understand that, but the opportunity was there, and it wasn't taken advantage of, and...
We didn't have an opportunity. I don't know where you're hearing this.
Just give Dad the phone, please. I'm sorry. I don't want to get frustrated. Just give Dad the phone.
Hey, sweetie.
This is seriously the first time that I've been angry. That I've been this frustrated to where I
Bond
can't
her
even
out
think
of
straight
jail.
at this moment.
On August 14, 2008, while Baez was in New York, Casey wrote a letter to the sheriffs asking if he could set up a meeting with her father, George Anthony. She wanted George to help her work out a plea deal while Baez was in New York and say there was an accidental drowning. One of Baez's associates arrived at the jail when detectives had arrived to talk to Casey. The associate prevented any contact with Casey. On August 20th of 2008, Tony Padilla posted Casey's 500,000 bail bond. She was fitted with an electronic monitoring device, an ankle bracelet, and released that day, per the terms of the second agreement with Jose Baez. Casey then took the extensive library of photographs, videos, and other items to Baez for him to sell. She's trying to pay her debt. Um, okay. I provided investigative services and daily personal protection for her through October 14th of 2008 and drove her to the home confinement office. On August 29, 2008, Casey was rearrested at the residence. She was later charged with uttering a forged instrument fraud, use of personal identity, and petty theft in connection with checks she had stolen from Amy. Tony Padilla revoked her bail bond. September 3rd, 2008, a meeting was arranged by Never Lose Hope Foundation for George, Cindy, and Lee to meet with an attorney for the purposes of the attorney becoming their spokesperson. Unknown to them at the time, and on the way to meet the attorney, they were taken to meet Pete Pedro Benavides, a convicted drug trafficker and money launderer for El Chapo, the Mexican drug lord and head of the Sinaloa cartel. Oh Jesus. Not El Chapo. Now they've implicated El Chapo too. Lord have mercy. Y'all leave Uncle Chapo alone. Oh my God. In addition to the 200,000 reward money, Benvides was now going to put up money for Casey's defense and 500,000 necessary for Casey's second bail bond. September 9th, 2008, I drove Baez, his associates, and the bail bonds to pick up Casey from the jail. Baez had scheduled a television interview for her that night. She did not want to interview and asked Baez to call and cancel. He called the network saying that he would have to take a rain check, hung up the phone, and said to Casey, "You now owe me 3 blowjobs." Whoa. Whoa. Oh my God. He said 3 blowjobs. You said it gets worse? Stop it. All right. All right. Hold up. Hold up. I'm not ready for this. Okay. We got like 3, 4 more pages and then we're done. Hold up. Where are the blowjobs at? Here we go. September 12th of 2008, Casey asked if Baez knew anything about a meeting I had with Lee at my office. I told her no. Baez had been unavailable. She had concerns about the guy on Suburban Drive and whether he had found anything. Casey did not want me to discuss anything with Baez because she was getting a new attorney and going to plea deal. She asked me to continue representing her and asked me to bring a contract. On September 13th, 2008, Casey signed a letter of engagement with my agency, DNA. Lee Anthony was present and witnessed her signature. On September 2015, 2008, Laura Buchanan, who had one of Bias's bloggers, emailed George and Cindy's new attorney, Mark, is it Nijame, claiming she had heard disturbing things like George was molesting Casey when she was younger and starting to molest Caylee, that Caylee could possibly belong to George or Lee. Within 2 weeks, the misconduct between Casey and Jose Baez had escalated. I arrived at the Baez's office unexpectedly one day and once again witnessed a naked Casey. This time she ran from his private office through the conference room to the hallway. Wait a minute. What am I reading? What? What? Wait. You hold up. Hold up. You're lying. Hold up. Within 2 weeks, the misconduct between Casey and Jose Baez had escalated. I arrived at Baez's office unexpectedly one day and once again witnessed a naked Casey. This time she ran from his private office through the conference room to the hallway. That night, I told her she could not allow him to continue engaging in this behavior. Casey told me she had to do what Jose said because she had no money for her defense. I reminded her that Baez had more than enough money from the network he sold the photographs to pay for her defense. Casey apologized and assured me it would not happen again. Get the hell out of here. Girl, I'm throwing the whole entire internet away. Hold up, hold up. Ginger, Ginger, give me your device right now. I ain't even gonna read. I am not gonna read this. Ginger, give me your device right now. No, this is beyond sickening. Like I cannot, you guys. Yo, I was not prepared for this. September 25th, 2008, I provided written notice to Jose Baez that DNA Investigates Inc. would terminate providing services to the Baez law firm on October 1st of 2008. October 1st of 2008, pursuant to my notice on September 25th, 2008, I provided written notice of termination to Jose Baez and the law firm and Baez law firm effective immediately. Oh my gosh. I continue providing investigative services and personal protection for Casey Anthony through and until October 14th of 2008. I continue providing investigative services and personal protection to George and Cindy Anthony through and until June 6th of 2009. My investigation my investigation into members of the defense team and Casey Anthony continued through Casey's trial in 2011 and remains ongoing at the time and date of this affidavit. Prior to the grand jury indictment on October 14th, 2008, Casey thanked me for providing Jose needed. She- What Jose needed. Yeah, I feel sick reading this. I'm not even like I'm having a physical reaction to this. She explained about not being aware of the details other than George would be implicated. After all, he was the only one in the family who would be testifying against her at the grand jury hearing. Casey talked about Casey talked about June 15th of 2008, Father's Day, when Cindy Anthony had taken Caylee to Mount Dora. When they returned, Cindy and Caylee went swimming in the backyard above ground pool. Casey had arrived home while they were swimming. Cindy asked Casey to get Kaylee's bath ready. Casey got a towel and took Caylee inside the house for her bath. Cindy had removed Kaylee's life jacket, bathing suit, removed the ladder from the pool platform, and moved it away from the pool. Cindy then went into the bathroom. Casey and Caylee were having a bath together. Casey suggested that we could say Cindy left the ladder up against the pool. On June 16, 2008, Casey had also left the back gate ajar. Since Roy was a meter reader for the house, maybe he could say he kidnapped Caylee. I told her vehemently then I would not do that because we both knew that Cindy and Roy had nothing to do with Caylee's disappearance. She was insistent that George, Cindy, and Lee Anthony and the me reader be implicated and blamed for the murder of Caylee. October 14th, 2008, Casey was indicted on first-degree murder charges and placed on a no-bond status at the Orange County Jail in Orlando. December 11, 2008, Kaylee's remains were discovered inside the swamp on Suburban Drive. The following week, Baez began talking to the media about a uh, video taken of me at Suburban Drive in November 2008. Baez actively pursued a public and media campaign to implicate me in the disposal of Kaylee's body. He told the media, I wasn't buying Dominic's story about being sent there by a psychic or the fact that he was investigating whether that was a teenage hangout of Casey's. It was beyond suspicious. What was beyond suspicious, Baez had already told me on Saturday, July 26, 2008, that Casey had murdered Caylee and dumped the body somewhere. He had also suggested to me if I could gain access to the swamp on Suburban Drive without being seen, to do so because it could be the place Casey had dumped Caylee's body. Monday, March 28, 2011, at about 2:14 p.m., the state attorneys deposed me at their office in Orlando, Florida. During my deposition, Jose Baez stated that the defense is going to make the strategic decision to waive any and all privileges as it pertains to Mr. Dominic Casey. Speak freely. At Caylee Anthony's trial, one of her defense attorneys asked my attorney if we could meet to discuss the questions she would ask me on the stand. We met in a room at the courthouse, which had been provided to the defense for the trial. Casey's attorney had a list of video markers relevant to the secretly recorded video taken by James Hoover, George and Cindy's volunteer security person, and Leonard Padilla, associate, of me on Suburban Drive in November of 2008. The questions was designed to promote responses that could implicate me in the dumping of Caylee's body in the swamp and connect me to Roy. I made it clear to the defense attorney that the video was secretly recorded. It had been tampered with, cut and pasted. She needed to talk to Baez about it. The attorney had absolutely no idea of Casey and Baez's planned fraud. When I was called to the stand for my testimony, the secretly recorded video was never produced. Based on my personal knowledge of the events and statements I personally heard from Caylee Anthony, authorize and permit her attorneys, including Jose Baez, to make false statements about George, Cindy, and Lee Anthony, Roy, and portray them as responsible for the murder of Caylee Marie Anthony. Caylee Anthony and Jose Baez knowingly and purposefully made false statements about me and portrayed me as being involved in a conspiracy with George, Cindy, Anthony, and Roy to conceal Caylee Marie Anthony's body. Somewhere in this ludicrous scenario, it was suggested that George gave Caylee's body to me for disposal. Cindy sent me to Suburban Drive in September 2008. Roy concealed the body until Thursday, December 11th of 2008, and then and in anticipation of collecting the reward, he dumped Caylee's remains into the swamp and radioed his boss. It's a signature. This was this was given in 2016. How come this isn't like, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this document. Why isn't this like more publicized? Why isn't look, why isn't Caylee Anthony not on a lie detector test on this shit? Listen, I get that she was this to me is like the lady lies about everything. She was charged, okay? She was charged with the lying with the law enforcement. Let me clarify that. But what is going on? So George and Cindy, they go through these lie detector questions and whatnot, and the lie detector determines that, they're not deceptive in the tests for both. These were some pretty tough questions, I think, and they're really great questions to ask. I don't know, you guys. It's just all in all, it's a sad story, and I don't know if we're ever really going to know the truth to a certain degree. I mean, we know the truth, but whether we're going to hear from Casey, right? Another thing I want to point out in his book, Dominic Casey says, the obvious question would be why I did not say anything at the time. There was privilege, and a plan is just a plan until activity is implemented. It would not be until Casey's trial when Baez publicly implemented his plan. would I be able to say anything? Even then, I would have to be asked the questions. So Dominic Casey says that he basically, being part of Baez's team, he sat there and he knew he knew a lot of information, and because of the privilege and everything that was signed, he couldn't outright say everything that he wanted to say back then, based on what was legally binding at the time. So if you sit here, I mean, like myself, I'm like, well, this is pertaining to the murder of a child. Like there should be something, right, to um excuse any kind of privilege, but I guess that's not the case, right? I mean, I don't know. Y'all let you guys being the legal experts, let me know in the chat. He wrote this book, and like I said, it kind of went very quiet. Part of it is you got to think about what was going on in 2016, political stuff. I mean, there was a lot of other things that were taking kind of more media attention at the time. And Jose Baez came out discrediting a lot of things, but there's not a lot of news outlets that reported on these allegations or him even trying to address them. The allegations are explosive. Ultimately, Dominic Casey sent a letter to Jose Baez's firm about not no longer being associated or working with them based on payment. And there was a conversation about payment, which third funding payment for Dominic Casey's services being funded. And that is where El Chapo's name comes up. Dominic Casey says that he had not received any payment from services it had provided to the Baez law firm, even though Baez had been receiving funds for Casey's defense from some legitimate source. In lieu of payment, Baez offered to publicly endorse DA, which is Dominic Casey's firm, and myself. I declined the offer of any endorsement and suggested that he return the money to the third party. I provided notice that DA would terminate providing services to the Baez law firm effective on Wednesday, October of 2008. He encouraged me to remain on the defense team. My decision to disassociate myself from Baez had been made. We shook hands and parted ways amicably. So what Baez said to the press was very interesting. In September 23 of 2008, the Baez law firm had issued a press release to the media. In part, the press release stated, a third party has provided the funds to hire an independent investigative team to chase down leads regarding Caylee's whereabouts. I contacted Baez and asked when DNA, which is Dominic Casey's firm, would be receiving payment. At that time, DNA investigated into who would have provided the funds to pay my agency. The source of the funds was questionable, and I would have declined receipt had Baez offered to pay it. It was the perfect opportunity to finally disassociate and distance myself from any nefarious activities. So Dominic Casey says, he has had concerns about Jose Baez, his practices, even looking back into his legal practices and what's been printed out about him. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about this affidavit from 2016 and past previous reports. What do you guys think? What do you make of it? In particular, should the Anthony family, both Cindy and George, be left alone? Will Casey ever speak about the real truth about what happened to that little girl, Caylee Anthony? Will there ever be justice for Caylee? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Rabbits out.